19th Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Roll call. Brooks.
Here.
Mike.
Here.
Brian. Thomas.
Here.
Melissa.
Here.
Rob.
Here.
We have a quorum. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So make that a motion. Second.
Motion is second to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4, the consent calendar. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Motion is second to approve the consent calendar. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. For the record, Brian is here.
At 6:30.
Well, yeah. We started right when the clock
Google
flipped,
time.
baby.
Google.
Item number 5, approval of the minutes for October 5th, 2023.
I saw one typo.
Okay, here we go.
I saw one typo and I'm trying to find it. There was just an extra ED at a second, the word was second, and it came out in print as seconded. Now I gotta find it. Oh, yeah, a public hearing to consider a variance application. A variance is needed for the seconded driveway. Just need to fix that typo, otherwise, move to approve.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the minutes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6, public comments. To all of those here who would love to get up and talk to us about anything, you're more than welcome to join us now.
So I have a public comment on behalf of
Public comment?
a builder in town. So
Okay.
he came into our office yesterday afternoon or so. And earlier in the day, I had sent you all kind of an email of the rough plan he had submitted. He is unable to be here because it is senior night at the football game. So I told him I would do my best to convey his comments, but in the event I convey them incorrectly, let me know and we can try to get things correct. So he wondered what the basis was for having the setback line, to have the driveway width on a cul-de-sac be measured at the setback line rather than the property line. So his concern was, if you look at the diagram he provided, that if he wanted to have a parking pad on the side of the garage that is not the house, that if you measured it at the 25 feet, that would be quite the abrupt angle to get a vehicle into that spot. So he was wondering why it's there and not the property line, because the property line would obviously be a better angle to maneuver a vehicle than. That was his question.
Right. Go
I'm
ahead.
confused.
Okay.
I can't pull this up because my computer's not working, but the cul-de-sac,
Yep.
that's an alleviance that gives them a better opportunity by taking it at the property line rather than the sidewalk line. So I guess I'm confused by his question. Can you explain it better to me, please?
So I will try to find the.
I can't,
So
like
we
I
don't-
said, my computer is not
So
pulling up the agenda, so
we,
I can't see what you're talking about.
we only got this email today. It's not actually part of the packet.
And that's his drawing. That's what he's.
This is not actually part of the agenda tonight, so
Yep.
this was just a discussion item or a public comment. We can choose to discuss it or not. I will
We
sort of
put it
leave that
on
guy's,
the- we could put it on the,
could we
the
put it on
next
the next
agenda?
agenda to discuss setbacks on cul-de-sacs? Yes, we could.
We could.
But my concern, per this diagram, the 40-foot is more lenient at the setback line rather than the property line on a cul-de-sac. What's his concern?
Paul spoke with him directly, so I may defer to Mr. Clark.
Yeah, he thought it was more restrictive, the opposite.
It's less restrictive. That's why we did this. We could
Because
have.
you can actually get to 40
if he did it at the property line, then I guess it'd be, he may not get the 40, is what you're saying, potentially.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. I don't understand the concern. We're being more lenient on a cul-de-sac.
See, where this drawing shows 34 at the property line, when if you go to the 25-foot setback, it gives you the 40, so I probably agree with you on the cul-de-sac. Is that what you're thinking, that?
Yeah, what's this, I don't understand the concern. We're giving them a leniency on the cul-de-sac.
So, roughly stated, I mean, it helps in the applicants here because no one knows their gripe better than the applicant. But it sounds like his thought was that if you take it from the property line rather than the setback line, that it would be able to taper back to provide better access than from the 25-foot setback, was his concern.
He wants to make his garage wider than what is shown in this picture, correct?
Either wider or have a parking pad to the side. That's my understanding. And having it closer to the setback line to the garage is a much different maneuvering area to that parking pad than the lot line is.
Because the garage doesn't face this, I know it's a curved street, but it doesn't face it straight on, it's at an angle, so if the garage were wider, then this line would be more like that instead of like that, it'd be more like that. It'd be a sharper angle, I think is what he's saying, or that's how I understood
So,
it.
I guess in my opinion, we can put this on as a discussion item for the next P and Z meeting.
And he did indicate that he would be present for the next meeting.
Perfect. That sounds great. Why don't we put that on the discussion item? We'll just make note of that.
Yep.
And we'll discuss cul-de-sacs at our next meeting.
So if the applicant wants to move forward with the regulations as we read them, then he can. And
Yeah.
if he wants to put the
Correct.
project on hold, waiting for your
Correct.
commission to look at
Yes.
it.
I agree with that. I mean, we do have things in place.
Yeah, I'll send an email to him tomorrow,
Okay.
ask him what his.
Because as far as I can hear, according to what Brian is saying, we're actually more lenient doing what we're doing in cul-de-sacs. So I don't, if we're already more lenient, then how more lenient do we need to be?
I don't understand the concern.
Yeah. So let's just plan to, if you would like to come in the next one, because we also probably need his help to understand what he's looking for, instead of trying to get secondhand. Okay. Moving on to item number 7 is the conditional use application for Brandon Wellness. If I understand correctly, they would like a continuation again for this?
Correct. So they didn't specify a time, so I will leave that up to you, whether you just want to keep continuing it to the subsequent meeting, if you want to do it a month at a time, or I'm not sure how far they are along in their plans. So they just want it
Well,
continued.
I would like to, let's just continue it for a month, instead of having it on every single meeting. Does that sound good? So somebody needs to make a motion to continue this until, what's the date? What would be a month from now? November something?
November, second meeting in November.
November 16th.
Yep.
All right, so if somebody would just make a motion to continue this until November 16th. Motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8, Chapter 1515-2. Can you go grab the agenda book so that Brian can't get his
Yep, we're
computer
trying to
work?
see if we can get this computer to work, but
Okay. Yeah, it is. All right. So,
1515-2B10.
Yes.
So at the last meeting, or was the last meeting the one that was canceled, maybe the one before, whichever one, we talked about the driveway variance. This 1515-2B10 came up that says access to a private garage shall consist of a minimum of 8 feet of unoccupied property beyond the required yards. There was some internal discussion by staff and on this board what the exact meaning of that was, so we figured since there seemed to be some questions about it that we would bring it back for an interpretation. So in the memo that is on page 50 of the packet, Melissa on city staff went back through and looked at the various ordinances we've had in the past, going back to the 2009 ordinance and the one before that. So there's the history of roughly that language in front of you on page 50 of the packet,
Okay.
if that helps you make an interpretation.
Can you remind me what case we had when we brought this up?
This was the driveway on East Birch, the variance.
East
The
Birch.
second
Yep.
driveway, you had to, since an R1, unlike some districts, you can add a second driveway by conditional use, namely the commercial ones. In residential R1 specifically, that's not an option, so your option's a variance. So they came in for a variance for a second driveway, and this provision was brought up. It's my understanding that for whatever reason, city staff had previously never applied this section. It exists. There seemed to be some discrepancy on what it meant, so
And
kind of-
this had to do with not having the driveway in the setback, is that correct?
correct. The property that came up was on a corner lot. The driveway itself, I don't think was maybe in the setback, depending on what this was. It was just off of Birch.
So we're looking at item number 10, right? On page 53, access to a private garage shall consist of a minimum of 8 feet of unoccupied property beyond the required yards?
Correct. To sum it up, does this mean that for a private garage, you would add 8 feet
To the
to each
25?
setback, so you would have a smaller building area? Does that apply to just attached garages, or is that detached garages, both?
So how do we,
Paul, Patrick,
Yep.
please get me to the correct section. It's not included in our document.
Okay. Page 53 of the packet has the section highlighted. If need be, you can have my
What's the
packet.
section number, please?
1515 2B10.
So I think I brought this up with Paul prior to my leaving for vacation, correct?
Correct.
So I'm trying to find it here, sorry. My understanding was we put this in place when we were talking about setbacks for garages quite a while ago. I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull it up here again.
mhm.
And it had to do with things like access from alleys, access from rear yards, so that we didn't pull out of a garage and cross the property line without allowing a proper distance for a typical vehicle. So if it's a side yard and we had a 5-foot setback for a accessory facility on the side yard, which is what, 5 foot? No, 7 foot, right?
7-foot setback, yes.
That we weren't backing out of a garage, crossing over the property line, conflicting with a sidewalk before the driver even got out of the garage and could see left and right if they were conflicting with the sidewalk. So my understanding, that's why this was put in place, was to protect the public from backing out of a garage over the property line onto a public sidewalk.
So that would be 15 feet. If you put it in the rear yard and you access the side yard, that means it would have to be 15 feet off the property line.
Right. So
But in-
15 feet would put your bumper
Yep,
out past the garage, still get your left and right
Yep.
windows out of the garage, so you could
Yep.
see left and right before
Yep.
you crossed into a public right-of-way.
okay. So, but but then it also extends it 8 feet past the rear setback. So that'd be 25, right? That'd be 33 feet from the house and the rear. So would we want it still in the rear, or, because it, right, how this reads is beyond the required yards. So if it's the required yard, that's 25 feet plus 8 from in the rear yard. I get doing it on the side yard to keep people from backing right out onto the property line. But does that mean we need to change it so that it's not another 8 feet away from the rear setback?
Depends on what we're talking about, rear, side, secondary yard. There's multiple,
Right.
there's multiple issues. But my recollection was, we talked about it as a safety issue.
Yep.
So I think what we need to do is look at what are all the situations where this might happen, whether it's R1, rear yard R1, secondary yard R3, secondary yard R, you know what I mean?
think where
We can't
you're-
just, we can't,
Yep.
we have to look at it holistically.
So we'll probably encounter this in corner lots. We would encounter this on double frontage lots, maybe. We would encounter this on 3 frontage lots.
It does say it's access to private garage, so it would be the access side, not like the side of a garage. So it wouldn't necessarily, like on that Birch one, it wouldn't really affect the
So we're not,
backyard or whatever. It'd be the access side that's going to, so it does say access to a private garage, so we might want to clarify that, but I
okay,
think it would be that if the reasoning for it is like what Brian said, then I think that the access is the issue, not the
but we
other
would,
sides of it.
we would also have to then clarify that the access would be that from the side yard or from the second front yard, which would be a corner lot, that's 8 feet, not 8 feet this way from the rear yard, it's 8 feet this way. Does that make sense? Because otherwise, we're telling people they have to move the access 8 feet away from any setback, and that probably isn't necessarily what we're looking to do. Does that make sense? I don't know how to clarify, or maybe your guys' understanding of it is that.
I think that potentially it came for, you have a single-family house.
Yep.
You have a detached private garage in the
Yep.
rear yard.
Yep.
You have to have a 7-foot setback. So we're saying at least 8-foot wide serviceable driveway to get you from the main driveway through this access driveway to get to your private garage in the rear yard.
Okay,
So here's an example, R3, high density.
where are you at now?
I'm on, so R3 is on page 22 of our ordinance. Okay, so we go to the setbacks, which are on page 27 of our ordinance. A side yard for an R3, single-family detached, is 7 feet.
Mm-hmm.
side yard of 15 feet shall be required where a lot is adjacent to or abuts R1 or R2. So you've got an R1, which has a minimum of 25 feet, correct?
So an R1 has a front yard of 25 and a rear yard of 25.
If you're a double frontage, it's reduced to 20
20,
feet,
correct.
correct?
Yep.
So an R1, 20 feet next to an R3, correct? Okay, now we're putting an R3 next to an R1.
Mhm.
R3 says 7 feet.
That's a single-family detached structure.
I understand.
Yep.
So that would put us at 15 feet, 7 plus the 8, against an R1, which is still less than an R1, but it still protects the R1, which might be adjacent to an R3. The point of this is it's protecting the R1s from the R2s, R3s, protects the R2s from the R3s. I know we talked about this because we were concerned about the issue of if I'm in R1 and I'm next to a property, whether it's R1, R2, or R3, that's double frontage, my living room is on a property line right next to a double frontage lot, and they want to put up a garage in their side yard. Their garage can be way out in front of my living room window. And they can have cars parked in front of that. See what I'm saying?
No,
I've got an R1, 25-foot
I
setback.
might need a drawing.
I got a
'cause-
25-foot setback on an R1, okay? To my
Yep.
left or my right, I would anticipate a 25-foot setback, okay? Whether it's R1, R2, R3, corner lot, whatever, okay? So, I'm in an R1, I've got an R2 or an R3 next to me, they're on a corner lot. Their lot reduction is reduced because they're facing
Yep.
maybe in a different direction,
Yep.
okay? We still need to protect that R1. The point of our ordinance is to protect the R1s from the R2s, the R2s from the R3s, the R3s from the R4s, the R4s from the HIs, okay? My point is, we got an R1, 25-foot setback. Next to it might be an R3. That R3 might be on a corner lot. Puts that corner adjacent to the R1 on a reduced setback, okay? They might throw a garage next to that R1. That setback might only be 7 feet. I got an R1 with a 25-foot setback. Right next to them is a 7-foot setback. To me, we're not protecting that R1.
I'm having a hard time seeing where this would actually, because a 25 is a front or a side, or a front or a back, or
On an
the-
R1.
or this. The only way you have an R2 and R3 who butts that with a 7-foot one is if there's a street in between them,
No. A corner lot. An R1
on a corner.
next to an R2 or an R3, where the R2 or the R3 sits on a corner lot. And they face a different direction than the R1.
Okay.
This came up when we talked about the, what's that development up by Split Rock and the interstate? I-90?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got R3. There's a street going north into the commercial development. Those
Okay.
people were concerned about the setback against their houses.
You mean all the people that have the yards that abut the I-90 Plaza?
There's a road that came in the back side of that development.
Yep.
those people were concerned, and there was actually a request for a rear yard garage. So all
Yep.
of this, I mean, this all happened a long time ago, so correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked about this, and we wanted to protect the R1s from less restrictive districts where the adjacent property had a lot that faced a corner or two front yards. So I'm just trying to bring the history here. I'm not
Yep.
arguing it. I'm just trying to bring the history here.
Brian, is this kind of, all right, I don't, maybe can't see, so apartments, corner lot, here's single family. Maybe they want to put a garage here. Is that what you're kind of talking about, or not at all?
How do I explain it? So,
Yeah, there would
so
be,
we've got an R1 that, so we're on the end of two streets, okay? We got two streets. Got R1 on this street, R2 or R3 on this street, okay? There's a street connecting both of those two streets. So we got two corner lots.
We
Okay.
have a whiteboard over here if you would like to. draw
Yes.
it out.
So we got
Yeah,
an
draw
R1
it.
here.
draw it on a napkin.
They might
and
face
pass it
this way.
around.
We got an R2 or an R3, they might face this way.
Uh,
So now we've got a side street to both properties, an R1 side street on a corner lot, an R2 or an R3 side street. Okay? Now, if the house faced that way, they'd have a 25-foot setback, right?
The
We're all,
house
we're all in agreement with that. But it's a corner lot, correct? So they get a reduction. Okay? So if they're facing opposite each other, it's a 20-foot setback for an R1, all right? If it's an R3, it's less than 20 feet. So I think what we were concerned about was if it's an R1 next to an R3 with a reduction in the side yard, the secondary front yard, that we still had the setback to protect that R1.
Yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with 8 feet of unoccupied property beyond the required yards.
Because the required yard is much, much smaller on a double frontage lot. Still need to protect that R1. I don't want to
Yeah.
see an R1 and all of a sudden because his neighbor is on a corner lot, he has a 7-foot setback. We still need to protect that R1.
I'm still having an incredibly hard time envisioning what you're talking about. I'm sorry. I need a drawing, I need something, because I can't, like, even the lots that you're talking about by I-90 Plaza, there's a street that goes in, there's 2 corner lots. Actually, they're triple frontage, they're corner lots because they back up to the backyards. And those lots are gonna be 25 feet off of this back property line, 25 feet off of the commercial property line, so there's still 50 feet between them. So they're still protected, if I remember
I'm just saying,
correctly.
this is what's in our ordinance.
Yeah.
The extra 8 feet. My
The-
recollection was we talked about it to protect the R1s. All right, so let me look through this and find an example.
Well, I thought it was to keep the building off of the street farther, not.
It is.
Yes.
When I was reading this, what came to my mind was like detached garages that face an alley. Where
Or a
if the
street.
garage is too close to the alley, then if you're backing out of the garage, you'd be in the alley before your car is all the way out of the garage. So I thought about it in that instance. And one other, now I've forgotten.
Is there a different zoning laws for alleys in this town? I mean, is that thought of differently than a normal
Number 9
neighborhood?
above it says any access building that is entering directly from an alley shall not be closer than 15 feet from property line.
There you go.
dividing alley.
So that takes care of alleys.
And I thought about it also, on those places where we have narrower streets than usual, where we say the setback starts at the middle of the road, then we would want the garage to be back farther on those. Those are the two instances that came to my mind while I was reading this.
You want me to use technology? Which side do I use? The tip of the pencil. Wow. Look at me go. So we have a house right here. We have a house right here. Okay, so this is street. This thing is awesome. What else can I draw?
Which way are the houses facing?
Huh?
All right, so here's an example.
Here's your
If,
front door,
Okay,
here, Tim,
and here's your front door. Let's just to mix it up a little bit.
okay, so, all right, I am in R2s.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going through the exceptions here. If the lot contains or abuts a private street, mutual access easement, the setback shall be 15 feet measured from the edge of the sidewalk easement that is closest to the structure. This is regarding front yard setbacks on public streets shall be 25 feet. However, the non-addressed front yard shall be reduced to 20 feet on corner lots if it also abuts a public street. So in this situation, a corner lot for an R2 becomes 15 feet, measured from the edge of the sidewalk that is closest to the structure. So adding the 8 feet back in puts us to 23 feet on a corner lot for an R2 adjacent to an R1, which is still less than the 25,
Okay,
which
so
you would expect.
let's say this is an R2.
Yep,
Where would you like the R1 to go?
behind it, right there. Behind, whoop, 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 whoop. Left, 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 left side, right there. Yep. That's an R1.
Okay. This is an R1. So this is 7 feet. This is 7 feet.
No,
I don't know.
that's a rear yard.
So this is 25 feet.
I'm assuming
This is 7 feet.
to the right of your R2 is a front yard, and to the left of your R1 is a front yard.
How do I erase that?
Tim, I'm not trying to be argumentative, I'm just trying to say what's in our code.
Click on the eraser button with your pen on the left.
Ah,
There you
this
go.
one? Oh! So awesome. That's not erasing anything. Okay, I'll just start over again. All right, so this is R2. This is R1. We're on a corner lot, right?
Correct.
So this is the rear yard here. That would have to be 25 feet. Correct? And if this was the side yard, then that would be 7 feet. Or it could be flipped the other way. So that could be 7 feet, that could be 25 feet. But these two measurements have to be 20, one of them has to be 25, the other one can be 15 in an R2?
20.
20 and 15?
The front yard setback on lots abutting a public street
Mhm.
shall be 25 feet. However, the non-addressed front yard setback may be reduced to 20 feet on corner lots if it also abuts a public street.
There you go. So that's an R1.
If the lot contains or abuts a private street slash mutual access easement, front yard setback shall be 15 feet measured from the edge of the sidewalk easement that is closest to the structure. So I don't know what that last paragraph means, but it's either 20 or 15 feet, according to the ordinance. The side yard at 15. Depending on if it's,
That would be assuming that this is a private street. Because if it's a public street, it has to be.
if the lot contains or abuts a private street mutual access easement, the front yard setback shall be 15 feet, measured from the edge of the sidewalk easement that is closest to the structure. So that could be 15 feet, yes.
Yep, and that's 20.
Yes.
But this is R1, so this has to be 25.
But if it's on a private street,
If it's a corner lot, it's
This
20.
is 7, and this is 7,
Yeah.
and this is 25.
they're gonna come down to the right.
Correct.
I think the point was to protect, if that R1 on your left faces down, to protect it from the neighbor if they put a structure in their rear yard.
Yep.
That is 7 feet from the property line and has cars parked in front of it. They could be right outside the living room or bedroom window.
So there would be 7 plus, so there would be 14 feet between
Well,
the
it'd
two
be,
structures.
yeah,
7 plus 8.
7 plus 8. Or
And
15, no,
actually-
sorry, 15 plus 8.
The way we have the ordinance written, it would be 25 plus 8, because it says there has to be an additional 8 feet
No, it'd be
beyond the
15,
required
it'd be
setback.
15 plus 8. 15 is the minimum right now,
Right here,
yes.
but if we put it here,
If we put a garage in the backyard,
it would have to be 25
no, it'd have to be 15 plus 8,
plus 8,
27.
so it would still not fit.
It'd be 27 in lieu of 25.
Right, but it still wouldn't fit.
Well, I mean, you could have the R1 moved over, and
But they
then,
don't have to, because they only have to be 7 feet over, so.
No, here,
but if you design it.
Enjoy, this is fun.
so if this is the corner, okay,
How much kids are good enough for you?
we have an R2 here.
No, it's the other side. It's the other side. There you go.
We have an R2 here. Property line here, and R1 here.
Yep.
This is 25.
Yep. You're very official, like an architect.
Okay, this is 15.
Yeah, but I mean, not connected to
If
garages.
we put a accessory building here, sorry, this is 15. Okay. This is 25.
Yep.
This is 15.
Yep.
What we did was protect looking out this window.
Yep.
And seeing a car parked right here.
So that has to be 8 feet back.
What we talked about was
Has to
moving
be.
this back 8 additional feet.
Yep.
Make this,
So then why wouldn't you have to move it also 8 additional feet this way?
it's not about this distance, it's about,
But it does say the access has to be,
it's about this setback.
it says the access has to be 8 feet of additional beyond the required setback.
This distance.
Is that the only thing that
To
says?
protect this setback.
Yeah,
No
I get
different
that.
than we're protecting this setback.
I just want to make sure that we don't have to also shift it this way.
No, it's not about, it wasn't about this setback.
Then it should be.
It was about. Doesn't have to do with the location of the access. It was about protecting this. The length of the access. From that house. And this from that house. That's my recollection of what we talked about.
the ordinance prior to 2009.
So,
It looks like the wording was in the ordinance prior to 2009.
yes,
It was in the, let's see, when those, um, oh, when those houses with the alleys went in, I wonder if the origin of this language didn't happen when those went in.
maybe, so is the alley language. I just want to make sure that we're only talking about one additional, not all additional. Because otherwise, if you take this number, you have to add 8 to it, because then the access has to shift over and back.
But there's no street there. There's no street between those two.
But that's not what this says. It doesn't say anything about street. It says
No, it talks about
access.
if it's vehicle access from a street to an accessory building. So yes, a street is included in the verbiage.
Access to a private garage shall consist of a minimum of 8 feet of unoccupied property beyond the required yard. So we don't specify that it needs to just be off of the access, like the entry into the driveway. It actually could be read that it could be all required yards. So we have to probably change the language so that it's just one and not multiple.
Sorry. Patrick,
Because
can you
again, the way,
Put us on the page number for the, I thought it was for vehicle access only. That we talked about this.
So 53 of the packet, it looks like 76 if you just have the ordinance book.
So 53?
Of the packet, not the ordinance book. No, of the packet. Where he highlighted item number 10. So if I remember correctly, the question that the staff had is that require 8 feet from all required yards? And what was the other question?
Well, I guess my concern, how would you access a private garage from an adjacent property?
We don't access it.
It doesn't say access from our adjacent property.
Right, I'm
Yeah.
just, I'm trying to historically recreate what we talked about. You wouldn't access, you could not qualify access to a private garage from an adjacent property unless you had a mutual access agreement.
But is the side of the driveway still considered part of the access?
Pardon?
Because you've built a driveway, right? It's 8 feet additionally off of this setback. But the side of the driveway is still only this far from this setback, or this far from the required yard. So does the side also have to shift over, just like the front did? And that is, I think, the question that staff is asking. Is that correct, Patrick?
We're more or less just looking for an interpretation. I mean, some could probably read that as beyond the required yards being all the required yards. Is access to the private garage just the access to the inside access of the private garage, or is that potentially emergency access to the structure from each direction? We're just kind of looking for some guidance why that's in there and how to apply it. Because it's written there, so it must be there for a reason.
So I guess
Presumably.
if we could interpret it that it's just the access off of a street, private drive, whatever, so that you don't have to then move the driveway an additional 8 feet off of the rear setback.
because it doesn't, it took me a while to get to this, but as I read it, it doesn't have technically to do with the location of the drive, of the access. It consists of, it is 8 feet in addition longer. It's not the location. Now, maybe it could have been worded differently, but, so I think that takes out the distance away from a
Rear
side yard.
yard.
Just the driveway itself has to consist of 8 feet in addition to the
Correct.
access to where it connects.
Okay.
It's up
I
to you,
think we're,
Tim.
I think we're
My-
all
my
interpreting
point
it
is,
the same
We were
way.
trying to protect the public from backing out of a garage
Yes.
onto a right-of-way.
Correct,
Whether it's across a sidewalk, across an alley, the point is,
yes,
we were protecting the public from backing out of a garage. You're backing out of a garage, your butt end of the car is crossing a right-of-way before you can even see left or right.
Correct.
So you take it how you want.
no, I think that's exactly how we're all trying to interpret it. Is that what you were looking for, Patrick?
Because we have so many different setbacks, would it be easier just to use similar language like there's on 9, where they're saying there shall be no closer than 15 feet to the property line abutting a street or something like that, so that if we're looking at a safety zone, can't we just set a requirement for a detached garage from a sidewalk or a street or whatever as a minimum requirement rather than adding 8 feet, because there's so many different setbacks depending on how things are configured. I mean, you could have a 25-yard setback or something, or 20-yard or whatever, and then you're adding 8 feet to it that might not be necessary. But if you're on a side yard, it would be necessary. So instead of adding 8 feet, just set a minimum requirement. Because one might have to add 8 feet to 20, one might add 8 feet to 7, when your goal is to get 15.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what we're looking at here. If we're looking at something different, then
No, I actually, so I understand. The clarification is that we're just looking to add an additional 8 feet to the length of the driveway to whenever it exits onto. It gets a little muddied with the required yards, because then what required yards are we talking about? So if we could figure out a way just to state that, like that, that would probably be, I think we're all thinking of the same thing, we're just thinking of it in 6 different ways. Does that make any sense? Yeah. Rob, you had something? Yes. Yes. Okay. Makes sense. I mean, does that help you?
I think so. Just not to keep beating the topic. That applies to detached private garages and not an attached, correct? Because you attached can
Yes.
still be in line with the house. Yep.
Correct.
Yep. Just
Yes. We done with that one? That took way longer. Okay. I didn't. Item number 9, chapter 1515-11, side yard setback requirement.
all right. So exception number 5, 15.5.11, exception 5 states, a side yard of 7 feet shall be required where a lot is adjacent to or abuts an R1 district. That language applies to single-family detached, single-family attached, and the attached surrounded by commonly owned space. Exception 6, below it reads, a side yard of 15 feet shall apply where a lot is adjacent to or abuts R1. That applies to multifamily. The side yard setbacks in that district for single-family attached and the commonly owned space is 0 or 10. So with that exception 5 to 7, that effectively lowers the 10 to a 7 on the side that abuts the R1 district. Is that the intent? Or do we need to modify that somehow, remove single-family attached from that? How do we want to do that?
What would your recommendation be?
So single-family detached, I believe, there's, to frame the discussion, the question's number 4, trying to find the right section in here. 55. Yep. So the side yard on a single-family detached is 5.
In
And then-
R2?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Then that also has the exception 5, where if it if the R2 single-family detached abuts an R1, it goes up to 7. Do we
Okay.
want to treat single-family attached more like a single-family detached home, or do we want to treat it more as the multifamily?
What's the width for a multifamily?
The multifamily is 15.
So what's the question now? What are we being proposed here?
So right now, the way the language works is that if you have a single family attached next to an R1 district lot, normally the setback for a single family attached in R2
Is
on the
5
common
feet.
wall is 0.
Yep.
On the opposite side is 10 feet. With this exception, that takes the 10 down to 7 for some reason.
Let's leave it at 10.
So what page again?
61 in your packet.
I'm having a hard time following this.
So I try to spell it out on the memo on page 55.
So it sounds like exception 5 is kind of a,
Maybe we should just cross out exception number 5.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that if it's a multifamily like that, the 10-foot was for a reason.
Well, wait, my concern, so we're talking R2s, right?
Correct.
So R2s, about 2 months ago, we had R2s were a 7-foot side yard setback. Okay?
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay? About 2 months ago, an applicant came in and wanted to change R2s from a 7-foot setback to a 5-foot setback. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Okay? Said applicant was talking about housing up against the interstate above, what is it, Stone Ridge?
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
Just correct me if I'm wrong, all right? So we agree, yes, we will reduce R2 setback from 7-foot to 5-foot, correct?
Correct.
However, we had several people come in and say, I already bought a house in an R1. I assume my neighbor was R1. You guys are now going to R2. So my neighbor is now 5 feet away, not 7 feet away. So part of our discussion was, okay, we will allow it 5 foot between R2 and R2, R2 and R3, but if it's between R2 and an R1, you need to meet the R1 setback requirement, which is 7 foot.
Correct.
Here again, to protect the R1s. Now, we're not protecting R2s against R2s or R3s against R2s. We're protecting the R1s from the R2s. So that was our reasoning, was that a side yard between an R2 and an R1 was to remain equivalent to the R1.
Yep.
So I guess, why are we changing that now?
Those are
It would be the
single-
seed number 5 in the single family attached.
Those
side
are
yard
single-family
box.
detached.
Not the exception generally.
These are single-family attached.
Well, regardless,
So
I don't
these
care
are
if it's attached or detached,
fourplexes.
it should still be 7 feet.
But this is saying that with that exception number 5 added to the single-family attached and detached, it would essentially take it up to 10. That's what.
So
it's
right now,
saying.
the number is 10. With that exception number 5 applied to the R2 single family attached lot next to an R1. The R2 setback next to that R1 right now is 10. Exception number 5 would reduce that to 7.
So if you have a line of fourplexes, we're saying that you have to keep them 10 feet off of the property line at the end of the building.
Correct. If it was
So if it's
R2
a-
next to R2 single family attached, there was the yard in the middle,
Yes.
it would be 10. But for
Yes.
some reason, this exception, if it is an R1 next to that R2, it's not 10, it's 7 for some reason.
I mean, 7 matches all the R1 setbacks.
I think this got written incorrectly.
Well, you don't want it 10 feet between the two attached fourplexes?
Okay, it should, between an R1 and an R2 should be
7 feet, yep.
Okay. Now, if it's an R2 multiple family, it should be 10 or 15.
That's what this says.
Like I said, this got written incorrectly.
Well, then we should strike number 5 and remove the 7 feet and make it be 10 feet from an R2 attached to an R1.
For single-family detached,
Sorry, I'm just-
exception
I'm
number
frustrated
5
with
should
the way
stay,
our
yep.
ordinance is written compared to other cities that
And I would see removing C exception number 5 from the single-family attached in both instances of that, but leaving it in the single-family detached.
There you go. Yes. That was quicker. Item number 10, Brandon zoning ordinance man caves.
So, a trend that is occurring, it's up to you whether you think what we have is sufficient or we want to get out ahead of it, is, so a man cave was traditionally something in your house where usually the guy would have a separate space to work on whatever he has to work on, from cars to hobbies to whatever he wants. It was generally in home. Now, with the rise of storage units, you have people wanting to make those storage units kind of external man caves from the home. So those, you can look online, there are some that are, they have a kitchenette, they have a bathroom, they have a sleeping quarters, they're practically an apartment, but they're called a man cave, and then you have some, there's the whole spectrum. At what point does it go from a storage unit to being someplace where someone's living, they have a falling out with their wife, so now they're living there, and how much do we care to regulate these things? So do we have a use in our zoning that applies there? Is this something you want in the industrial park? I'm just trying to look for some thoughts as this is a thing that is happening. Where do we want to draw the line between a storage unit versus, if you are just there on the weekend to work on your car and they have a bathroom and you leave and you go home, is that one thing versus you have a kitchenette and you spend quite a lot of your time there? Do we care?
I know of like 3 or 4 buildings in the industrial park that currently have apartments in them. We might not legally know about them, and they might not have been actually approved. But,
And we do allow them in conjunction with a business in most cases.
right.
But is the intent of that where you have a warehouse, then you live in that warehouse?
If the structure is built to building code standards, I don't know. Any thoughts?
Well, if they're not zoned for any kind of residential, then it shouldn't be used for any kind of residential. And if they're zoned for commercial, then I think the city would expect that they could generate sales tax. And, you know, if they're being used to be lived in or to sell product or something, that affects what kind of property tax the property pays. So,
We allow storage units in light and heavy industrial, and you don't collect sales tax on storage units.
I never used a storage
Yeah.
unit, so I didn't know if they.
I don't either, but I just know they don't collect
charge
sales. No.
tax.
Nope. So, if I wanted to build an apartment complex in an HI or LI, could I?
I don't believe that is currently a use. I mean, you could add it if you want, but I don't believe that
Do we
is
have it
listed.
specified as a conditional use?
In LINHI, the owner of the land can have his business in there up to so many square feet.
Multifamily dwelling is not a use.
You see multifamily, you said
Yeah.
a business owner.
Nope.
So are we talking about just storage units that you rent? Are there such things as somebody puts up a
Yes.
line of storage units and you
Yes.
purchase your,
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Are we talking about those two or just the ones you rent?
I don't know if it would make a difference.
Some people buy them, some people rent them.
There are ones that have been bought on Redwood Boulevard, right next to a vet clinic. That building is full of owned units. I don't believe there's a residence in any of them, but I don't know if we would know if there wasn't.
Yeah. And that's zoned commercial.
Yep.
And
Actually, I think that's zoned HI or LI because that's part of the industrial park. So you said we do allow a residence if somebody's running a business in it, but we don't necessarily specify that we allow a residence if somebody is just using it as storage.
So that comes down to kind of the use of terms. It is the owner-occupied dwelling unit. So does that refer to business owner or just the owner of the unit? Because you could have warehouse as the principal use. You could have someone living in their storage warehouse, potentially by conditional use, if that's how you interpret it.
we did that for, was it Schwann's? They want to put a little bed and place for their route drivers to stay
Oh, yeah.
overnight.
I
Little
don't think
Debbie.
it was Schwann's, but it was some kind of a,
That was-
yeah.
Yeah.
And we have shops where people have their mechanic shop. You know, it's a good startup opportunity for them. You don't have to pay rent on a house and rent on your shop. You can live
We-
in your shop as the owner.
We have traditionally always looked at something like this as a business slash residence. Now, I don't have enough stuff to ever have a storage unit that I would live in, but, I mean, some people do, and I don't know. Like I said, as long as it's built or monitored by building codes,
I mean, not on this term, but on a tax term, I have a hard time giving up all this land all the time to storage units. That's
Yeah.
prime for businesses all the time, and that's all this town seems to be coming to, is storage units in our
right, so.
commercial area.
I know the Development Foundation started looking at uses before we would even sell lots. Now granted, once the lot is sold, it's kind of out of our control, if you will. But we certainly tried to monitor that because once we realized that, yes, storage units don't generate sales tax, they don't, right? There's no business run out of them. They have built a lot of business suites that people run business out of in the same fashion. I think you see those out on Holly, just off the street. I think those were built as business suites, correct? Those metal buildings that are out there. And storage units. There are also storage units out there, but the bigger ones are business suites. There's also a building out there that I believe somebody is living in. So I don't know.
So it seems like the LIHI, where it says it's a conditional use, right, owner occupied dwelling unit. So it, although LIHI would normally be inhabited by businesses, it actually doesn't specify a business from what I read, unless there's something else. But it does say owner occupied, so it would limit it to somebody owning it, not renting it.
Yes.
Is all I'd see.
That means a building would have to be built and sold off as suites versus rented as storage slash living units.
The ordinance says 1,300 square feet or 25% or less.
That is for the, yes.
LIHI.
Yep.
I guess I've got a question what we're addressing here tonight. It's already addressed.
Is it written specifically in there that it's for a business, or are you just assuming that we put that ordinance in there for businesses?
What's the question here?
To some,
Well, I mean, the thing we're talking about, like, up on, North Ninth, there's an auto body shop place, and the gentleman that owns it also, lives in it. These are like storage units, storage condo units, they're like 10 in a row or 5 in a row, whatever. And there's not gonna be a business in there, but it's in heavy industrial, light industrial, and they're gonna make a man cave out of it. That's the only function. There's not a business out of it, they're not gonna sell it to business, they're gonna send it to an individual to run a man cave out, which is,
You're saying they're being marketed that way?
that's right, ma'am.
Not just that it happens once in a while, but that they're actually being marketed that way.
There is a developer that wants to do
That
that.
does make a difference,
I
I
say
think.
absolutely not.
No.
Here's my reason why. Because the living quarters has, and Paul, please step in if I'm overstepping my boundary, but a place where you live, has way different protection requirements from a building standpoint, way different exiting requirements from a building standpoint than a storage unit. Your occupancy loads are calculated completely differently, and in my mind, it puts a lot of burden on Paul as to how do I determine this? Is this a storage unit? Is this living quarters? Is this occupied? Is this unoccupied? It's pretty straightforward if it's strictly storage, and that's the intent of what our ordinance is. But as soon as you start mixing these two types of occupancies, you create a huge, huge headache from an occupancy load, exiting requirements, occupancy separations, and I don't want to go there. And it's even worse for me from a zoning ordinance, and for Paul, it's threefold. So I don't want to go there. I don't think there's any intent that we want to have living quarters in HI and LI.
I
Other
agree.
than what's already in there.
I agree, but you'll get guys who'll say, it's just my man cave, I live at home, the man cave. But yeah, I might be watching the game and I fall asleep for 7 hours, and then it's morning, oh gosh, or I might think, I think it would be very difficult to police it. If they say, well, it's no living quarters, it's just man cave. I think it would be very difficult to police that. How do we know you're not sleeping there 3 nights a week, or
Well,
you're not having your?
We don't.
We don't.
That's my point.
My point is.
That's
as
why
a-
I don't think they should be marketed that way.
As a city, I don't think we should entice that complication.
Yeah.
So in my mind, it's pretty clear. No, we don't allow dwelling units within HI and LI, other than what's already stated. Now, if somebody wants to fall asleep at their storage unit, that falls on them. I mean, if they want to get locked in their storage unit, that falls on them. But I think from a city liability standpoint, I don't think we want to make the issue a gray area that, oh, yeah, well, we allow these things to happen. So, I mean, if somebody's wife locks them in a storage unit and they burn to death, I don't think the city wants to put that liability on themselves, right, Paul?
Yes, right.
So what's currently in the ordinance, what he just read to us, is an exception we made if somebody wants to have an owner-occupied business, they can build a dwelling unit within it. We don't specify whether or not that is a attached or detached structure, correct? Like, so if they wanted to build a 7-unit condos with 7 quote-unquote business suites that had living units in them, do we allow for that currently?
Well, like the one on North Ninth, it actually is a detached building.
Yep. But he read in our ordinance that we do allow 25% or 1,300 square feet, correct?
Owner.
In owner-occupied. So if you build a building that has 7 suites in it, and they sell them off as owner-occupied suites,
They're not owner occupied if they're sold. If they're sold, they're not owner occupied. If they're leased, they're owner occupied. You still own it, you own those 7 suites, you lease out the tenant rights to someone else.
no, you can buy a suite.
So if you
but
sell
the
it off,
people who
it's
buy
not yours
them,
anymore.
yeah, but the people
If
who
you
buy
sell it,
them,
someone else owns
But
it.
the person who
the
bought it
7
owns
people
it.
that bought
So-
them
so
could,
they have to own it, they have to operate it, they have
Yeah.
to live there.
Yeah,
So
right.
I can't live in unit A if I own unit,
correct,
I can't
right.
live in unit 17 if I own 17A,
Absolutely.
17B, 17C.
So if you build,
17A wants to live in 17A,
well, yes,
they can only be 25%.
yes,
But if I owner occupied and you sell it, you no longer own 17A. You own 17A, B, or C, but not.
so you're saying
17A.
they can't build a suites, 7 attached, because as they market them,
Not if
somebody
they
will
sell it,
own,
They can't. No, they don't own it, Tim.
But all the new owners do.
the new owner would.
Right. They're the owner, not 7. Okay.
But that,
Maybe I'm explaining this incorrectly. So, somebody develops 10 units, okay?
Yep.
They want to live there. So they own 10A, they own 10B, 10C, through whatever, through the 10 units, okay? They can live there. And,
Yep,
okay? Now, if they sell 10A off,
Yep.
they don't own 10A.
I'm
but if
more.
I buy
yep.
10A, then I can do that.
If you own 10A, you can
But
live
I-
in it if you own less than,
But if I buy 10B, I can live there, and if you buy 10C, you
Right.
can live there, and he's, but,
as
so
long
yes.
as it falls within here.
Yes, so we already allow for it,
So we
essentially.
would allow
Yes.
for it.
We already allow for man
As
caves,
long as each individual is less than 25% and 1,300 square feet.
correct.
But if
We
you-
So-
yeah,
we
you-
allow for it if it's an owner occupied, which means, I mean, that means there should be a business in there, right?
No,
I don't think it says that you have to have a business.
it doesn't say you have to have
own
a
it.
business.
You have to own
It
it
doesn't
and
say you have to
occupy.
operate a business,
You just have to own it.
owner occupied.
So we
if I
already
buy
allow
a-
for
If I
it,
buy a 2,000 square foot suite,
yes,
then I could have a 500 square foot
living unit,
living unit in
Correct.
there
Rest for
Yes.
Yes.
storage.
as my
Correct.
my man cave with living quarters.
yeah.
Yes.
So
That's
essentially,
allowed. So that's allowed. That's what we're saying.
essentially, we already allow for it. I mean, if we don't have something written in our ordinance stating that it has to be a business, then we already kind of allow for it.
So from our sense, I'm just trying to, beat it to death.
Please,
So what we would get a set of plans. Someone would come in with a set of plans. This is a place for storage, and I'm going to have X in it, but it's not a dwelling because I don't want to go through the CUP process. If they have a water and sewer service to it and it has a bathroom, is that enough to make it a dwelling?
no,
No.
What if they have a kitchenette,
no.
a sleeping quarters?
Well, it's got to
What do you
be
mean?
20,
How do you define sleeping quarters?
right.
Could be a pull-out sofa.
So
If they
I,
want to carpet it, put TV in there, air conditioning, I don't care.
yeah, it's not an official sleeping quarters.
How they want to finish up their storage unit, I don't care.
Yeah. And to be honest, they could probably just build a big shell and sell off the shell and let whoever buys it finish it off themselves.
I'm looking at it from an electrical standpoint. There are so many codes that are required, and Paul will go along with this, for residents. Ground fault circuit interrupters, a lot of different things that aren't in this thing that they all of a sudden converted into a man cave. They have to come up to code, and Paul will have his feet getting wet all over the place in there, but and that's just the electrical. I mean, like you said, sewer and water and everything. If you have a bathroom in there, you gotta have a ground fault circuit interrupter. If you got a kitchenette, within 6 foot of a sink, you gotta have ground fault circuit interrupters. You gotta have,
Guys,
Yeah, but that's
this is no different than if somebody puts a bedroom in their basement.
pretty much,
They can put a bed in there,
yeah,
we don't care.
they pull
Now,
a building
if they want to
permit.
sell it as a bedroom, it's got to meet code, right, Paul? It's got to have the exiting, it's got to have all
Yes.
kinds of things. Now, these are the exact same issues. If somebody wants to fit up a storage unit and put carpet in it, put TV in there, cable TV, if they want to put heat in there, if they want to put,
Yes,
you know,
A shower.
pneumatic,
doesn't matter.
air compressors in it with fittings, I don't care.
Yep,
But they can't sell it
as a finished space.
a home, or they can't
No.
sell it as a business or whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't
outside of
want to
our
see,
ordinance.
I
What
wouldn't
they
want
wanna
to see
do,
an
we don't care.
building with a big sign out in front, man caves for sale, you know? I wouldn't want them to market that way.
So it sounds like we don't want to alter or design a new use for this. We want to, Stay
The
where we're at.
use already exists. The terminology man cave does not.
I mean, hell, I'd
So
love
it's
to have a
no
urinal in
different.
my garage. I'd love to have a TV in my garage. I'd love to have my garage heated and air conditioned. I'd love to have carpet in my garage. I mean,
People do.
it's still a garage.
Yep.
What, I mean, I know what you're saying. What classifies the 25% dwelling occupy? When you're saying they can finish this whole thing off with carpet, or let's just say they do.
No. I mean, well, I mean, they
'Cause
can't
then we don't
officially.
care. Yeah. Well, where do they, that's what I'm saying. Where does
Yes.
that stop then? Where do we say,
Well, if I were to go buy a storage unit right now, I'd buy a storage unit. If I wanted to go in there and frame up walls without getting a permit and put carpet down and not tell anybody, I could do all of that with that storage unit that I have. But when I go to get rid of it, I still have a storage unit. Even though there's all this stuff in there, it's still a storage unit, right?
I can't sell it as a house.
Can't sell it as a house.
Can't sell
can't-
it as an apartment.
Nope.
I can't market it
As a house.
either.
Nope.
It's still classified.
But
as-
according to our ordinance, you.
Correct.
Again, if you had like 2,000 square foot unit,
Now-
you could,
The-
if you got everything permitted right.
Yes.
Finish it off as living quarters for 500 square feet.
And there's
sell
the
it as living
difference.
quarters, if it was permitted correctly.
I mean, we
No.
can't-
But no,
No.
you'd have to sell off the whole unit.
I mean, this is no different than a conditional use thing. I mean, we can't help people use their
Right.
facilities. We can't, we're not a policing agency. So if somebody wants to use their home and use it as a business, they can. But until we're giving policing authority, we really don't have a say in it. Unless they come to us, follow the procedures, ask for permission, we can't say, hey, yes, you can sell services out of here, or no, you can't sell product out of here, or no, you can't live above your garage. You know what I mean? Based on what we have in front of us and the authority we have, we can't really tell people we can't police people how they're using their facilities unless they come to us legally. So, here again, if somebody has a storage unit and they want to fix it up nicer than my home, good for them, you know?
But in that situation, I think where Rob is heading to, and I don't want to correct you, let's go back to Mike's example, 2,000 square feet, only 500 can be a residential setup with the
Correct.
carpet and the TV in the bathroom.
that-
The other 3/4, the intent is to be a business.
Correct.
So you couldn't take a 2,000 square foot storage unit and make it a whole big man cave,
No.
only 1/4.
I'm not saying that, Paul.
Right.
But if somebody wants to take, I mean, I rent a storage unit, I pay $100 a month. Now, if I wanna go in and put carpet in there,
Yeah.
if I wanna put carpet in there, nobody's stopping me.
that's what I'm saying, is that's Paul's now discretion of what is, if they would come in for the permitting and they wanted to do that, because that's how they like their setup of their garage. They like to lay on carpet when they work on their vehicle. But that's what I'm saying, it's a discrepancy for him, where is it finished at?
We have an ordinance in place.
It's still a storage unit, so as long as it's not a building, a UBC issue, it's fine. They wanna put a toilet in there and it's a storage unit, as long as it still meets, the issues with, fire separations and, fire construction, is it rated construction, non-rated construction, sprinkled, exiting, all of those things from a storage capacity, we're okay. I mean, if they want to carpet where they park their garage, I don't care. If they want to put in a finished ceiling where they store their boxes, I don't care. If they want to add a toilet where they store their boat, I don't care. Does Paul? I don't know, Paul, do you care?
Well, okay, there's a line of, there's a lot of things that are illegal out there today.
Yes,
No, I
Okay,
understand.
yeah, so, but when somebody comes into City Hall and asks for something, then we pull out the book and it has to be regulated. And
Yes.
that's what we're trying to regulate right here,
Right.
this
Well-
25%.
So if somebody comes in and wants to put a bedroom in there, that's a red flag. Because it's not allowed, okay? You don't have exiting, you don't have separation, you don't have fire rating between your unit and the next unit. That's a red flag. But if you want to build a separate room to store this compared to that, I don't think we have a say in it. Or if you want to put carpet in this half of your storage unit and not that half of the storage unit,
right.
I don't think we have a say.
Yep, and because our meetings are public and they're out on the interweb for people to look at, I don't want anybody to get the idea that it's okay with us.
We
if
would
you
like
sneak
people to
by.
follow the
I'm not
rules.
saying that.
Right, I'm not, I know what you're saying, but I also know how people think.
Right.
It's no different
And-
than what people do at their garages.
We
I
just
mean,
like to be people to do things according to the,
So,
Some people's garage is a concrete floor, exposed wood studs, exposed rafters, exposed deck sheathing, all right? I mean, that's what you get when you move into a house, all right? Some people move in, they sheet rock the garage, they insulate the garage, they heat the garage, they might even cool the garage. Some people add plumbing to the garage. I've seen fish cleaning stations in garage. I have seen toilets in garage.
pet cleaning,
right.
Yeah,
pet,
I've seen
pet
TVs in
bathtub.
garage.
How about,
I
yeah,
go running
and a
on
shower and a
week-
TV and a
on daily
coach and a
basis,
kitchenette.
I
and-
see people with parties watching TV in their garage,
Yeah.
okay? So there's different levels of how you treat a garage, no differently than how you might treat
But at the end of the day, when you go to
It's
sell your
still
house, it's a
classified
garage.
as a garage. You can't
Yes.
sell it as a living quarters, you can't sell it as a kitchen, you can't sell it as living space, okay? It's still technically
And in
taxed
this
as a
case,
garage.
we have something in place that says you can finish 25% of these buildings and you can sell it as a place with 25% finished, correct? Yes. So, it already exists. I mean, it does. Anything else? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 7:52.